Hey, what's up you guys? It's Bloody Jacob here to bring you my Season 4 general review of Syfy's Being Human. And obviously if you guys look at my channel, you'll know I've done a general review and thoughts videos for each season of this show. And I also have mentioned that me and my girlfriend have been watching it together. Well, I'm rewatching it, she's watching the whole thing for the first time. And we just finished the final episode together the other day when she was over. And yeah, so I thought it would be a perfect time to make my video talking about the final season in general. And yeah, where the hell is the final season on DVD anyway? Seriously, it's really irritating if you're a fan. And really doesn't make too much sense, does it? You know, they release every season on DVD and they don't even give the final season a send-off. They don't even give it a complete collection or anything like that. So yeah, that's upsetting, but at least it's available on Netflix, so check it out on there. But other than that, I don't know of any other risk-free way you can watch the final season, but I'm sure some of you guys know your ways and have your own things you do. But anyway, also before I really get into this review, I wanted to thank you guys for the reception on my tribute music videos I've made. I've made over 10 of them so far, around 13 or so, 13, 14 now I think. And I posted the Michonne tribute, which I just uploaded today. I posted that on the Spoiling the Dead forum, and I got a lot of really good praise on there, which I was pretty surprised by and happy about, so I'm grateful. And more to come with them in the future too. So just like doing something different, I find the process pretty addicting, especially with all the stuff I watch. So yeah, now let's get into this season of the show. First off, will this be the last Being Human video I do since it's the final season? No, because down the road I do plan doing a video talking about my favorite season of the show as a whole, and you know that same video will also kind of compare each season against each other. And yeah, so there's that, and there may be other videos I do on it in the future too, because Being Human is probably my favorite TV series of all time. I'll just say it right now. And yeah, so I'm never gonna completely stop doing videos about it, so you guys don't have to worry about that. And if you don't like me doing these videos, sorry. That's all I really have to say about that. And yeah, so let's get into the season. Of course, Season 3 ended with quite a few cliffhangers, like the one in particular being that Aidan's wife, Suzanna, is still alive, or, well, alive, we should say. And, yeah, we find out fairly quickly into the season why she's still existent, pretty much, you know. I remember that cliffhanger at the end of Season 3 that drove me crazy, especially since Suzanna was played by Catherine Isabel, who you guys know how much I love. I love all her work and stuff like that. She's my favorite actress. And yeah, she does a great job in this season too. She did really well with flashbacks in Season 3. That were some of my favorites of that season. And you know, Aidan's still dating Kat at the same time. Susanna's trying to look in on him and things like that. And so Aidan's kind of bewildered, I guess, by you know, seeing like Suzanna here and there at the party Kat had brought him to. She shows up there. And before we really get into everything with Suzanna, the thing with Kat ends the season as well. Kat doesn't die, so there's that, you know. I kind of actually expected her to die, but she didn't. But they do end up breaking up once Suzanna sort of tells Aidan, or like re-illustrates in his mind that, you know, where could this relationship really go for him, you know. You know, he basically either has to like be true to her and show her what he is, and like he'll find out what will happen from there, or if he wants to spare her any more pain or suffering, then he should just, you know, break up with her. And Aidan actually chooses to be fully honest with her and tell her exactly what he is. And the initial reaction to it isn't what you'd expect at all. You know, she just like gives like the biggest laugh, and that ends one of the episodes this season. But then the follow-up to it is that eventually Aidan convinces her that he actually is a vampire. You know, he's not like he doesn't need mental help or anything like that. And yeah, so he does it by showing whole like putting her head against his chest, she can't hear any heartbeat. Then he of course shows her the eyes when he goes into vampire mode. And so Kat basically says she's scared of him and she kind of wants him out now. But so I think it ended, wasn't a good ending for the relationship, but it definitely ended better and more normally than Aidan's prior relationships. With Rebecca and Søren, it usually ends in a pretty heavy death. So yeah, like even Aidan eventually sees that later on in the season. Of course he's pretty broken about it at first, but then as he's hanging around Kenny, he's at first asking. We'll talk about Kenny in a second, but he's at first asking Kenny, to like erase Kat from his mind. He like plucked that memory of her out of him, but then he realizes that it's might be kind of good for him to have like more of a normal ending to something like that, like you just said, and so he eventually makes his peace with it, which I thought was good. And yeah, speaking of Kenny this season too, we'll get to Suzanna in a minute, I swear. But speaking of Kenny this season, after he ran off, at the end of season 3, as Aidan told him to do, he's come quite a long way for himself. The little kid, and turns out he's actually the leader of the Boston clan of vampires. Supposedly, he's trying to, bring them back, and they briefly sort of explain how he did that. He basically. Supposedly we're supposed to think that Kenny's actually a pretty capable fighter. Apparently he might be like a pretty smart and dirty fighter. That's what I was thinking anyway. But I sort of do wish they would have shown us that. Of course we're supposed to believe that, and I do believe it. But I think it would have helped the whole idea of Kenny being the leader in the position Bishop once was. It would have helped to see that if we actually seen how he took over. If we actually seen like a fight or two, maybe like just show him fighting like another alpha type of vampire that was trying to go into that place in position of power instead. So I think that would have improved that part of it a little bit. So that kind of bugged me that they didn't really show too much of that. But it was still kind of cool to see like just vampire civilization sort of like starting to come back a little bit after the virus in season 3. And Blake was serving him as well. And it was kind of weird because we didn't see much of Blake this season, minus a couple episodes. And I thought that was sort of weird. I thought she should have been involved somehow with more of the story in the final season, even if she was killed off. But we didn't see her again after a certain episode, so I thought that was kind of odd, especially since we've seen Kenny quite a few more times. But yeah, so those are just some of my minor gripes with that side of things. But and it ended up being tied together with the Suzanna storyline too, because it turns out Susanna's going around, like killing vampires that are, taking innocent human lives, and we're supposed to think that's because of what happened to their son, as well as, sort of supposedly trying to ensure that, it doesn't happen to anyone else. And of course, when Aidan is asked by her to target Kenny, the leader, she doesn't know of Aidan's connection to him. She doesn't know that Kenny is Aidan's son, and so that creates a conflict of interest. And it was a really badass scene at the end of one of the episodes. You see Suzanna coming through on the security camera, and just like staking vampires in the little den that Kenny made left and right. And I just really enjoyed that because Catherine Isabel's a badass. And so I really liked that, and of course I loved the reveal about what actually happened to Aidan and Susanna's son. I thought that was all really good. With Isaac, first Suzanna tells Aidan that he died a grandfather. She looked into the records, some time ago, and Aidan's very happy about that. That probably created like a peace in his mind and stuff like that. And but of course, that is too perfect. We find out later on that how Suzanna came back in the first place is obviously because she's a vampire. I didn't mention that yet. And it turns out that as she was like drowning, and she was floating down the river after Aidan was killing the priest and stuff like that in the flashback, it turns out that Bishop actually pulled her out of the river and turned her into a vampire. But Suzanna, of course, didn't really want to accept being under Bishop's wing, so she kind of ran off on her own for the next while. And she supposedly only stayed away because she knew that Bishop had taken Aidan under his wing, and she didn't want to be around him for that. But we find out the real reason Suzanna had stayed away from Aidan for so long was because of what she actually did to their son. When she first woke up as a vampire, she ran away from Bishop, and then she just, of course, when you're first turned into a vampire, your instincts are going like all over the place. You can't really control it. It's difficult to control as it is, even for a somewhat old vampire like Aidan. He still has his issues holding himself back. But a fresh vampire, you're pretty much going to lash out at anything, like right after a turn, And so she just sees something running, and she just like takes it down like it was a deer, like she moves really fast and just sicks it. And it turns out that she completely fed on and drained every bit of blood from their son's body, and she is horrified with that with herself for years, and she could never face Aidan knowing that she did that. And the episode when that comes out, when Aidan finds out, when she tells him what happened to their son, it's some of the best acting in the series, especially from Sam Witwer. His reaction when Suzanna tells him is just perfect. It's like grief, then it goes into rage and anger, then back to sadness all over again. Just really perfect, and it flowed so well together. In that same episode, Suzanna thought Aidan was out of control, because he was like having issues with feeding again and stuff like that. So she chained him to, apart in her apartment she had. And I just thought it was one of the most brilliant sequences of Aidan, being asked like all the victims' names, and Suzanna thought he would just forget them, but it turns out that he's kept every name in his head. He was a serial killer in the past, but he still remembers every single name, so he's carried, like we would think he would, he had carried that guilt and remorse and regret with him since he started doing it. And even if he was like a different type of vampire at the time, that's still stuck in his mind no matter what. So that just really illustrates the weight we've known is with the character since season 1. So I just love that Sam Witwer got showcased a lot of emotions with the character in that scene. I just thought it was one of the best in the series. And that side of the story ends like around like episode 11, 12, right around there somewhere, maybe 10, but it's right around like 10, 11, 12. This story kind of comes to a close, minus a little bit with Kenny, but we'll get to that in a minute. Of course, Suzanna ends up trying to take down Kenny herself after she finds out what he is to Aidan. She supposedly left town, but of course she didn't. And she uses this dosage, to put Kenny down to make him so he can't really defend himself. And she lures Aidan there at the same time, and she tries to force Aidan to kill Kenny himself, but he instead stakes Suzanna. And then Aidan tells Suzanna that she has to forgive herself, because this whole tirade that she's been on since she's turned into a vampire for the, all these decades, has been because of what she did to her son. And of course we see that scene in that one of the first episodes she is in, of her like whipping herself and looking at the cross and things like that. And so yeah, she dies, but that's kind of what had to happen with the character. When I first seen her, I kind of had hope that her and Aidan would end up together, but I thought, despite that not happening, I thought it was like a nice full circle for the Aidan character to have that all come back, and it had a pretty good closure too, I think. It made sense, even though it was sad, but it fit. So I like that. And so that's the majority of what went on with Aidan's character this season. That was like the main stuff. But of course he goes into the other character storylines as well. Of course they're all tied together. And Josh, this season, he had to deal with, pretty much the reverse curse, you know what I mean? So like instead of turning into a werewolf like once a month on the full moon, he only turns into a human once a month at the full moon. Every other time besides that, he's a werewolf even during the day. And so Aidan and Nora at the beginning of the season are having like stay out there in a camper, and Pete's old camper, and which was a pretty good tie back to season 3. And they just take Josh, is a werewolf for runs, and then they lock him into this cage, and it's like silver wiring like wrapped around the door and stuff like that. And eventually, there's some, of course, magic done by Sally, who is trapped in a certain type of world with Donna. But Josh is eventually brought back, except he has these issues of him like having less control over his impulse or like his temper, sorta. But also, just like the wolf inside him starts to have more of an influence on who he is. And we also see Josh and Nora sorta joining in with this big pack after they help this couple who is just about to have a baby. The baby's gonna be like a purebred, I think. I'm not sure if it was going to be purebred or not, but we see this werewolf type of baby, and then that couple turns out to be a part of this larger pack. Yeah, that's the right word. And the leader of this, I think his name is Mark. He's kind of like this alpha douche jock type of character, and Josh is pretty irritated by him pretty constantly. But as soon as I see the power Josh has, I like that different look they had for Josh as a werewolf a few times this season. He sort of looked like the take on the more Wolfman style look for a werewolf, and I like that. And what ends up happening is we see this character called Ramona coming in. It's tied to more of the Sally side of things, but she locks Josh in a room, and Josh ends up being let out, then slaughtering every member of that group. So yeah, Mark included. So yeah, that was pretty brutal. There was blood all over the walls and stuff like that. We didn't actually see it happen, but we seen the aftermath, and it was definitely very carnage oriented, we should say. So that was all good, but also we get a very good development for Josh in an episode towards the end of the season. Of him finally finding that more common ground, that middle ground with his werewolf inside him. Sally helps him find it, and he ends up being more in control like he was. And so him and his werewolf are supposedly more at peace, like Pete was telling him how he and his wolf were back in season 3. So Josh finds that place, and I was really happy for him. That was a good development for the character, especially for a final season. And the Sally side of things this season was also pretty good too, especially with Donna. Of course, I told you they're trapped together, or sort of stuck in this world together by Donna's choice, and Donna actually got pretty well developed. She changed as a character. At first she was this very good villain in season 3, but then we find out more about how she died, her sort of origin type of story, and she really actually started gaining some sympathy for her, and we find out she wasn't always evil. She had just been consumed by this power and lust that she had since gaining all those abilities. And she actually ends up helping Sally when she goes into these alternate realities, which I'll talk more about in a minute. And so Sally finally helps her find her peace, so I thought that was good, pretty good change for the story. And so before I get to the final ups, also Sally was having these visions of Ramona, the little girl in the house I mentioned earlier, and she turns out to be sort of the spirit of the house. She had been there apparently since season 1 and before. We just, of course, hadn't seen her because that storyline obviously wasn't introduced yet. But she had apparently always been there, and she had overheard all these conversations they've had over the years, so she knows what they all are, and she knows what they've all been through and things like that. So she'll use that against them later. But so also Sally eventually went to these alternate realities. We had 2 episodes that were in a different reality, which some people didn't like, but I actually thought these were pretty fun for the show, because what we basically got was to see how things would have been different if certain storylines or characters had gone different ways. If Aidan hadn't killed Bishop when he did, if Aidan had never killed Rebecca whatsoever. It was also great to see Rebecca too, and that cameos from Bishop in this season again were awesome, and especially that Rebecca cameo too. I love that, even if she wasn't fully turned or anything. It's just good to see her at the bar and stuff, and talking to Josh and Aidan outside the hospital before all that happened. So I really like that appearance too, and Sally, while she's trying to go through these different realities, it ends up making things worse than they actually were. And so Aidan and Josh end up being at each other's throats, being more divided than they ever were in the series. And we also get this alternate version of Aidan killing Ray, which I thought was pretty awesome. When Sally is there physically, and she's turned into a werewolf in the meantime, and she is accidentally killed by Ray when he and Josh are fighting Aidan and Marcus, who are buddies in this reality too, apparently, which is pretty different. Yeah, it's cool to see Marcus again too, and then Aidan just wants to kill Josh after that. Him and Bishop run Ray and Josh down, but this Aidan decides to let Josh live with himself. This Aidan decides to let Josh live with himself because he knows the torment that Josh feels for what he is, so he thinks it would be worse than just to kill him, even though I think even this Aidan still felt something for Josh at this point, And I love the way Aidan killed Ray. It was really brutal. At first, Ray was giving him a fight like earlier, but when they tracked him down here, Aidan just took every shot Ray gave and hardly moved, and he just gouged Ray's eyes out and then tossed him off the walkway, which was pretty brutal but awesome as well. So there's that, and Sally had to work to sort of undo all the things she's changing here. And in the meantime, all that happening, she actually starts to realize she's been falling in love with Aidan. And if you were a fan of the show, you knew that was kind of going to happen. They've sprinkled little hints here and there that little seeds planted that this is what it was going to build to eventually. And so Sally falls in love with Aidan in this alternate reality as she's going through it. And once she's able to sort of mend things between Aidan and Josh in that reality, she has to go back, of course, to the real, present reality of the show that we've known for, the past 2 seasons. And, the alternate reality Aidan tells Sally she has to remind the real, actual reality Aidan somehow of what they have together. And, he has to know, which is some great scenes, by the way. And of course, you geek out. Any fan of the show wanted these two characters together, and it's finally sort of happening with this. And there's also this really good fight of Aidan fighting all these werewolves, not them in their werewolf form, but the group that Josh kills later on. Of course, it's close to the full moon, so they have more strength and stuff. But Aidan still fights, is fighting pretty evenly with all of them at the same time. And Sally ends up helping him out by possessing bodies and letting him get free shots and stopping people from hitting him at certain points. So that's all good, and she ends up possessing this big black guy's body. And, she tells Aidan, how she feels for him, and then in that body she kisses him, which is pretty awkward and funny at the same time. But then, of course, it shows it as actually Aidan and Sally kissing, of course, and that was just awesome. And, then Aidan goes to confront Suzanna and stuff like that. But I already talked about that. So that was all really good. And we finally got that payoff of Aidan and Sally being together, which I love. And, the actresses have such great chemistry together. Everyone on the show does. And let's see. Of course, I can talk about the finale. And what ends up happening with Ramona, is that she turns out to be very childlike. She kills her sister, very bratty. She's been secluded for even longer than Sally was when she died, of course, for decades, pretty much. And so, yeah, she's pretty much a psycho at this point. And she doesn't want any of the, any of them to leave the house, even though they're being forced out. We also seen Sally's brother, Robbie, again this season, and he ends up being killed by Ramona, sort of midway through the season. And, he gets his door, though. Well, he was going to get his door, but then he vanished, and we don't really know where he is at this point. But, so there's that, and they're being forced to leave the house. They're being evicted because they her father wanted to make more money off of it. And the final episode to the series is amazing, I'll say that. And before I get to that, my favorite episodes of the season was probably the ones that included the Suzanna confessions I talked about. And I also love the episode where Ramona has them all locked in the house, and she basically has Aidan see Henry and trying to convince him that there's another world out there if he kills himself. There's an afterlife for him. like a form of heaven for him, which he didn't believe, of course, and that was a vision by Ramona, of course. And she tries to have Sally see Kat and stuff, and then she has Josh, supposedly seeing Nora killed and stuff like that. It was a really, really twisted episode, but it was awesome at the same time. So I love that episode too, and of course the finale, which I'm about to talk about, was great. Excuse me. I'll just say this, that out of all the shows I've seen the full runs of, Being Human and Breaking Bad probably contain the best endings to any TV series I've seen all the way through. With Breaking Bad, I don't want to talk about that too much right now, but Breaking Bad had a bittersweet yet pretty satisfying ending that I thought was absolutely brilliant. And Being Human has a fairly happy ending with a little bittersweet thrown in, of course. Not everything's completely perfect, but yet you still feel good about what happened at the end. And, after Sally is able to, stop the vision, I didn't really mention this yet, but there was a vision of Aidan killing Josh over Ramona and Kenny making him think that Josh had destroyed Sally somehow. And also Aidan was forced to kill Kenny after Ramona sort of created the situation after Kenny had figured out that Astrid was killed in that massacre that Josh had caused. After Kenny had figured out that Aidan lied to him, they were forced to fight. Aidan held back a little bit, but in the end Aidan staked him. And so there's that grief, and then there's also manipulation from Ramona of him thinking Josh had killed Sally. And so there's a vision of Aidan snapping Josh's neck, and Sally's able to freeze it before it happened. And, then Aidan was still psycho, though, still thinking that Sally was gone because of Josh. But Sally ends up tossing him against the wall and sort of like pulling the stuff out of his mind. Then she actually turns him into a human again, and which was a very, very big thing for the Aidan character after all the seasons we've seen him and after what we know he's lived through. And so another full circle thing for Aidan, of course. And so he got his heartbeat, but except Sally was completely gone after that sacrifice, which was really sad. We didn't see much of her in the final episode, but you see her again at the end, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And so after they run off from the house as Ramona's going insane about Sally being gone, Josh and Nora take Aidan out to this diner, and Aidan has these taste buds again, because he's human. Where as a vampire he could fake eating human food, but it would taste like dirt for him. But now he actually can taste things like we all do. And so he has this burger, he's just loving it, just chowing down, and then they're gonna bring him sriracha chili fries, which he was pretty excited for. But at the same time he is sad and depressed that Sally wasn't there to see him as a human. And we get this great scene of Aidan sitting on the camper as it's snowing. Him just completely letting out all his grief over Sally being gone, which is a great scene. Very, very good acting by Sam Witwer. And this season contains some of the best acting from Sam Witwer. He's always been good in this series, but this probably contains some of the best scenes for the characters. So I was really happy about that. And but the thing about it is, it's not because of a mess up with Sally's spell turning Aidan into a human. It's that with that, the years Aidan cheated of living because of being a vampire have started to catch up with him because he is immortal now. Immortal, I should say. Not immortal, immortal. And so he's aging at a faster pace, and his body's shutting down. He has the heart or lung of a 90-year-old man. And so Norris basically tells him he might only have a week to live at most if he's lucky. And so that's kind of sad, but then we also get to see the more desperate side to Aidan's character of him trying to find this vampire at a bar, trying to get the vampire to turn him again. But of course Josh stops it, and we find out that Aidan's afraid to die, because he doesn't think there's going to be anything on the other side for them, even if he is a human now. And then eventually we see Ramona. She kills this guy who's coming over to mess with the building and stuff like that, to work on the building, I should say. Not mess with it, but Ramona kills him to sort of send a message, so Aidan ends up seeing in the newspaper that there's a murder at that vacant house. And so Josh and Aidan both agree that they have to go back there and just end Ramona, just put a stop to it. It wasn't right they ran off and left it like that. And so Aidan and Josh supposedly agree that he'll go get Nora, and then they'll meet up there in an hour to take care of it together. But Aidan, of course, goes there ahead of time, and he confronts Ramona by himself because what does he have to lose at this point? He's going to die anyway. And of course, Aidan is the main character of the show. They all get focus, the three of them especially, three roommates. Aidan, Josh, and Sally, and Nora too. But of course, when it comes down to it, I still believe that Aidan was the main character. He's sort of the hero of the story, which is awesome. And so he goes there by himself to, help his friends, because Josh has more to live for than he does at this point. Nora's also pregnant with a child on the way, so he doesn't want to risk that, being messed up somehow. And so he goes there, he confronts Ramona. Ramona sort of runs him down verbally, saying how he's been a serial killer for centuries, and then how most of the blood spilled in this house is on his hands is because of what he is and what he's done. And Aidan, admits that he's lived with his regret, which they really showed this season with Suzanna and stuff like that, which I touched on earlier. And of course that's not good enough though, and Aidan knows that. And even if there's nothing for him on the other side, he says he's died for his family before and he's happy to do it again. And he puts on his leather jacket, but Ramona sends him crashing down the stairs. Of course he's moving slower because of his weakening body and stuff. And Aidan falls down the stairs similar to how Sally did when she originally died, after Danny pushed her, of course. And but as Aidan's laying there at the bottom of the staircase, Ramona's all satisfied and cocky and stuff. Aidan pulls out a lighter from his jacket, and we see, they didn't show this a couple minutes beforehand, but Aidan actually had poured gasoline all over the house, and so he tosses the match and it starts lighting the whole house on fire. And I love Ramona's face when she knows she's screwed. I just love that. And Ramona is destroyed, and the house is burned to the ground. And we get this great quote from Aidan as he's laying there as the house is burning. God, I can't remember the exact quote. I don't want to butcher it, but he says something about, in the end comes rushing up at you, and everything that you thought was real is gone. You think of the meaning of the life you lived, and you think of who you loved, and you let that take you home. And that was the basis of what he said, and I actually forgot, but he gives this little slight smile to the camera. He looks into it, which is really awesome. And so he destroys Ramona, sacrificing himself. And then Josh and Nora arrive there a little while later. They see the body being held out and everything. And they go into the house. It's all black. It's all ruined and stuff like that. Nothing really left. And we see that Aidan actually came back as a ghost after all, despite what he thought. And we get some great little exchanges between him and Josh again, which I kind of missed. And, how them winning looks like a house burned to the ground. And, so Aidan just says that this is what they strive for, since the start of the show, their experiment to, try to be normal together. And, look, Josh is starting a family, it's full circle that, they did it. And then a door actually appears for Aidan, which Aidan never believed he would get because of what he is and what he's done. But as Josh says, he can't think that he doesn't deserve it, because Aidan really does deserve it. Despite all the wrong he's done, he's still deep down a good man, and he's proved it with these people these last few years. And so Aidan gets this door, and his goodbye to Josh and Nora is just incredible. Some great, really actually raw acting from all three of the actors here. Of course, Sam Huntington and Kristen Hager. And just so much emotions. And I'll just say it, sorry, hon, but my girlfriend did cry. Which is what I was supposed to do. You shouldn't feel bad about that. And I admit, when I first seen the final episode, I teared up too. So, yeah. And, a really well done goodbye, and then Aidan walks through the door. It's a bright light. Then we see him briefly over on the other side of it. It's all bright and white. I like how the show did that too. They never specifically said there was a heaven on the other side. They just always referred to it as a somewhere else, another place. No more sure what it is. So I sort of like how they didn't say for sure whether there is one or not. So it kind of left the whole religious thing at a neutral level. And but Aidan goes over to the other side, and he sees Sally there waiting for him, and she says, "Finally." And then they sort of embrace and they kiss, and Josh and Nora realize that Sally is probably on the other side, and that's just great. And I love that. Of course, there wasn't much of Sally in the final episode, but the way she was used is perfect, and it made sense for the story. And so I love that. And then we get this final scene of Josh and Nora laying in a field, both having dreams of, being together with us, Aidan and Sally and stuff like that. Then they wake up and talk about pies being in the oven, and then we find out that it's actually a couple years later at least, and they have 2 kids now. They named their daughter Sally and their son Aidan, which is really awesome to see. I love that. And that's the final scene of the series. And so there's really all I have to say about the final season 4, Being Human. It was a very good season. I wouldn't say it's my favorite season of the show, but it was still good, and the final episode was amazing. Very satisfying close to the series. Bittersweet, but also happy for the most part. Yeah, so I thought it was all really well done and it all fit. And so that's all I have to say about this season, Being Human, probably my favorite TV series of all time. Hope you guys enjoy this review, even though it was longer than my other ones for the show. But like I said, this probably won't be my last video for Being Human. I plan on doing a video talking about my favorite season as a whole down the road at some point. Not sure when, but down the road I will be making more videos just talking about certain parts of the show like that. And so I may do a couple videos later talking about the Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice images that popped up today. And I may do another video talking about the Fear the Walking Dead poster that just came out a couple days ago. So look forward to those. And I will be making more tributes to what yet, I'm not sure. So you can look forward to those either way, though. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll catch you guys next time. And peace.